Beautiful, spicy ladies. The most unsettling thing about power is when it doesn't beg to be noticed. Society has always known how to categorize women. The sweethearts, the nurturers, the social butterflies, the fierce leaders. But then there's the Sigma female, an anomaly, an enigma, a figure so self-contained and untouchable that people don't know whether to admire her or fear her. Here's a fact. In psychological studies, people are more likely to distrust individuals who don't reveal much about themselves. Why? Because mystery breeds suspicion. And when a woman is both mysterious and in complete control of her own world, she doesn't just raise eyebrows, she triggers alarm bells. Suddenly, she's not just independent, she's cold. She's not just strategic, she's manipulative. She's not just confident, she's a supervillain in disguise. But why? What is it about Sigma females that makes people feel so uneasy? Is it the fact that they don't need approval? The way they can disappear without a trace? Or maybe it's just that they operate with the kind of calm, calculated detachment that makes even the most self-assured individual squirm? Strap in, because we're about to break down 11 brutally honest reasons why people think Sigma females are supervillains. And trust me, once you see the list, you might start wondering if they really are. Number 1, they are unapologetically selfish in a way that works. Sigma females don't waste time feeling guilty for putting themselves first. And that's exactly why people mistake them for villains. Society has spent centuries conditioning women to be self-sacrificing, always giving, always nurturing, always considering others before themselves. But Sigma females don't play by those rules. They prioritize their own needs without hesitation, and that level of unapologetic self-sufficiency unsettles people. It's not selfishness in the way most people think. They're not out here manipulating, using, or stepping on others to get ahead. They simply refuse to bend over backward for people who wouldn't do the same for them. They see through transactional relationships and aren't interested in emotional labor that drains them for no reason. Because they set firm boundaries without explanation, hesitation, or regret, people assume they must be heartless. Here's the irony. If a man operates the same way, he's called focused or driven. When a Sigma female does it, she's suddenly cold, difficult, or even dangerous. It's as if people expect her to tone herself down just to make others comfortable. But she won't. She doesn't ask for permission to live on her own terms. That refusal to conform is what gets her labeled as a villain. The real reason people struggle with Sigma females isn't that they're selfish, it's that they don't need validation to exist. They don't chase approval, they don't cling to toxic relationships out of fear, and they don't waste energy proving themselves. They're not cruel, but they won't be drained. They're not unkind, but they won't tolerate nonsense. And they're not evil, but they won't play by rules designed to keep them small. That kind of power, pure, independent, and untamed, terrifies people because deep down, they wish they could do the same. Number 2, they don't fear loss, which makes them unstoppable. Loss is one of the greatest tools of control. Fear of losing a job keeps people in miserable workplaces. Fear of losing love traps people in toxic relationships. Fear of losing status forces people to conform. But Sigma females don't operate that way. They don't cling, they don't beg, and they don't let the fear of loss dictate their decisions. That's what makes them so unpredictable and why people often see them as dangerous. Unlike most people, Sigma females don't measure their worth by what they have or who they're connected to. Their identity isn't tied to a relationship, a title, or a social circle. If something no longer serves them, they walk away without second guessing. If someone betrays them, they don't seek revenge. They erase that person from their world like they never existed. This level of detachment isn't common, and when people witness it, they mistake it for cruelty. What they don't realize is that Sigma females don't lack emotions. They just refuse to let emotions rule them. They process loss differently. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, they adapt. Instead of clinging to what's familiar, they embrace change. They don't spend time mourning over what could have been. They focus on what will be. That kind of resilience makes them seem unstoppable because, in a way, they are. You can't break someone who doesn't fear starting over. This is why they often seem untouchable. When you can't be blackmailed by fear, manipulated by guilt, or paralyzed by loss, you become a force people don't know how to deal with. Society expects people, especially women, to grieve visibly, to break down, to need saving. Sigma females rewrite that script entirely. They move on, rebuild, and come back stronger, leaving people wondering if they ever cared in the first place. And maybe that's what unsettles people the most. Not that Sigma females don't feel loss, but that they refuse to let it control them. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and join our amazing Spicylady soulful intimacy by using Spicylady technique and psychology quotes about life, where we uncover the secrets of love, intimacy in relationships, and everything in between. Hit that button and let's grow together. Number 3, they treat rules as mere suggestions. Sigma females don't break rules just for the sake of rebellion. They break them because they see through them. Most rules in society aren't built on fairness or logic. They're built to maintain control. Sigma females don't subscribe to control. They analyze, question, and when necessary, reject. This unnerves people who rely on structure to feel safe. Take traditions, for example. Many are outdated, restrictive, or designed to keep people in line. A Sigma female won't blindly follow them just because that's how things have always been. If a rule doesn't serve a purpose beyond maintaining the illusion of order, she disregards it, not recklessly, but with complete awareness. This is why she often seems like a threat in environments where compliance is expected. In rigid workplaces, she's the one questioning ineffective policies while others quietly endure them. In relationships, she refuses to conform to outdated gender roles or expectations. In society, she doesn't seek permission to live as she pleases. She doesn't need a movement, a protest, or an army to push back against the rules. She simply acts outside of them, and that silent defiance is powerful. But here's where things get interesting. When someone consistently sidesteps rules without consequence, they start to feel untouchable. This is why some view Sigma females as dangerously unpredictable. They don't wait for approval, they don't need validation, and because they don't follow the same social script as everyone else, people don't know what they'll do next. That level of autonomy is unsettling. Most people follow rules because they fear punishment, whether that be judgment, exclusion, or failure. Sigma females don't operate on fear. If a rule makes sense, they follow it. If it doesn't, they ignore it without guilt. And that's what makes them seem, at times, like the kind of character who could walk out of a villain's lair completely unscathed. Because in a world where rules are used to control, those who don't obey are the ones who hold true power. Number 4, they never explain themselves, and that's infuriating. Most people feel an almost instinctive need to explain themselves. They justify their choices, over-explain their decisions, and seek reassurance that others understand their intentions. Sigma females don't bother. They don't see the point, and that silence, that refusal to offer explanations, drives people insane. It's not arrogance. It's not that they think they're above explaining. It's that they don't see why they should. If they've made a decision, it's because they've already thought it through. If they've walked away from a situation, it's because they've deemed it unworthy of further discussion. If someone misunderstands them, they won't launch into a monologue to clear their name. They don't argue for the sake of being right because, to them, truth doesn't need an audience. But here's where things get messy. People fear what they don't understand. When someone refuses to explain themselves, it creates a void, and in that void, people insert their own assumptions, usually the worst ones. They mistake quiet confidence for cold indifference, assume a lack of explanation means a lack of conscience, and wonder, why isn't she defending herself? What is she hiding? And that's how the villain comparisons start. Most good people in stories constantly justify their actions, trying to prove they have noble intentions. Villains, on the other hand, don't explain. They act, let others wonder, and remain unreadable and unknowable. That's exactly what Sigma females do in real life. They refuse to waste energy proving their worth to people who have already made up their minds. This isn't just frustrating, it's infuriating. People want a reaction, They want closure, they want an explanation that makes them feel comfortable. But Sigma females don't give them that satisfaction. And nothing unsettles people more than a woman who doesn't feel the need to be understood. Number 5, they prefer exile over belonging. Belonging is a basic human need, one that most people will compromise themselves to fulfill. They'll conform, tolerate, and adjust just to secure a place in a group. But Sigma females don't have that need. If the choice is between losing themselves to fit in or standing alone, they'll always choose exile. And that choice confuses, frustrates, and even intimidates those who can't imagine life without a tribe. Society expects women, in particular, to be communal, to thrive in groups, nurture connections, and prioritize relationships above all else. A woman who willingly distances herself, who isn't interested in forced sisterhood or social validation, disrupts that narrative. She doesn't avoid people out of bitterness. She avoids them because most social circles come with unspoken rules she has no interest in following. She won't engage in fake friendships, tolerate gossip, or pretend to be someone she's not, just to keep others comfortable. She doesn't need the approval of a group to feel whole, nor does she fear rejection because she never seeks acceptance in the first place. This makes her an outsider by choice, not by circumstance. And society has never known what to do with a woman who chooses solitude over social survival. The misunderstanding is inevitable. People assume she's cold, arrogant, or even emotionally detached. They take her distance personally, thinking she sees herself as better than others, rather than simply different from them. But what they fail to realize is that exile doesn't make her lonely. It makes her free. Free from shallow interactions, forced obligations, and the exhausting performance of fitting in. And that freedom is the one thing most people secretly envy, but will never admit. Because while they're bending, shrinking, and exhausting themselves to belong, the Sigma female walks away without guilt, without hesitation, and without ever looking back. Number 6, they have no need for validation, making them an enigma. Most people spend their lives chasing validation, whether through compliments, social media likes, promotions, or the approval of friends and family. It's human nature to want to be seen, appreciated, and reassured. But Sigma females don't chase any of it. They don't seek applause, they don't beg to be understood, and they certainly don't adjust themselves to earn approval. That's what makes them such an enigma. When someone doesn't care about external validation, they become impossible to control. You can't guilt them into compliance, flatter them into submission, or pressure them with expectations. They define their worth internally, which means no one else's opinion holds enough weight to shake them. And that kind of self-sufficiency is both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling to those who rely on external praise to feel secure. Here's where things get interesting. The less a Sigma female seeks validation, the more people crave hers. It's an unspoken rule of human psychology. When someone isn't trying to impress you, you instinctively want their approval even more. People become fixated on earning her attention, her respect, her acknowledgement, simply because she gives it so sparingly. She becomes a puzzle they desperately want to solve, a person they can't quite figure out. This is why Sigma females often find themselves at the center of fascination, even if they never ask for it. People project onto them, overanalyze their actions, and obsess over what they're thinking. It's not because they're intentionally mysterious, it's because they don't play the game everyone else is playing. But this absence of neediness also makes some people uncomfortable. Society teaches us that approval equals belonging. So when a woman doesn't need anyone's approval, she's labeled as distant, arrogant, or even unapproachable. In reality, she's none of those things. She simply refuses to let external opinions define her. And that's the real power of a Sigma female. She isn't above validation. She just doesn't require it. In a world that thrives on approval seeking, that makes her impossible to ignore. Number 7, they study people like an experiment, not an emotion. Sigma females don't just listen to what people say. They analyze everything: tone, body language, micro-expressions, inconsistencies. While most people react emotionally to situations, they step back and observe as if gathering data. They notice patterns in behavior, see past facades, and silently file away information for future reference. To the average person, this kind of detached observation can feel unsettling, even predatory, like being watched, studied, assessed. It's not that they lack emotions, they simply don't let emotions cloud their perception. While others get swept up in words and distractions, they focus on what isn't being said. They recognize when someone is lying, when someone is insecurely posturing, when someone's confidence is just a performance. This makes them nearly impossible to deceive, which is exactly why people either respect them or fear them. The unsettling part is that they rarely reveal their own thoughts in return. Most people are used to emotional reciprocity. If they express excitement, they expect excitement back. If they share vulnerability, they expect reassurance. But Sigma females don't follow that unspoken script. They absorb everything but reveal little, leaving people wondering, what is she thinking? What does she know? This naturally puts them in positions of power without even trying. Because when you can read people with razor-sharp precision but remain unreadable yourself, you automatically hold the upper hand. And when people sense that someone understands them better than they understand themselves, it creates an odd mix of admiration and paranoia. This is why Sigma females are often mistaken for being manipulative or calculating. They're not necessarily plotting anything. They just see things for what they are, not what people want them to be. In a world where most people wear social masks, being around someone who sees everything with clinical precision can feel like standing under a spotlight, completely exposed. Number 8, they are masters of psychological warfare without even trying. Sigma females don't engage in pointless arguments. They don't scream, beg, or try to force people to see their side. Instead, they let silence do the work. While others are busy over-explaining, defending, or reacting emotionally, Sigma females simply observe, calm, composed, and unreadable. And that's what unnerves people the most. Most people expect a reaction when they provoke someone. They want an emotional response, something to latch on to, a sign of weakness, insecurity, or anger. But when they push a Sigma female and get nothing in return, no visible frustration, no desperate need to explain herself, that silence alone is enough to make them spiral. Suddenly, they're questioning themselves. Did I say something wrong? Why isn't she reacting? Is she planning something? Sigma females know that the most powerful form of psychological warfare is making someone doubt their own mind. A simple, well-timed pause, a knowing glance, or an unanswered statement can do more damage than an entire argument. They understand that people's biggest enemy isn't them. It's their own insecurities. So they don't fight battles with words. They let people fight themselves. What makes this even more dangerous is that they rarely do it intentionally. Unlike manipulative personalities, Sigma females aren't out to control or break people. They just refuse to play the emotional tug-of-war that most people rely on. If someone disrespects them, they don't engage, they walk away. If someone lies to them, they don't call it out. They let the liar bury themselves in their own dishonesty. This level of detachment is unsettling because it forces people to sit with their own actions. There's no argument to distract from the truth, no emotional reaction to justify bad behavior, just silence. And silence, when used correctly, is a weapon more lethal than words. Number 9, they are impossible to manipulate. Manipulation thrives on emotional dependence, guilt, flattery, peer pressure, tools people use to bend others to their will. But Sigma females don't fall for any of it. You can't guilt them into compliance, charm them into submission, or socially pressure them into following the crowd. This makes them a nightmare for manipulators who quickly realize they have no leverage over them. The reason Sigma females are so difficult to manipulate is simple. They don't need external validation. You can't use approval as a weapon against someone who doesn't crave it. You can't use rejection as a punishment when they're perfectly fine walking alone. Emotional blackmail doesn't work either because they see it for exactly what it is, a cheap attempt at control. Manipulators rely on emotional reactions to keep people tangled in their games. They provoke guilt trips, gaslight, and twist reality until their target questions everything. But when a Sigma female is faced with these tactics, she doesn't take the bait. She doesn't react. She doesn't explain. She simply sees through it and disengages. Nothing frustrates a manipulator more than someone who refuses to play along. And that's where the fear comes in. Most people, whether they realize it or not, like to feel a sense of control over others. When they meet someone they can't control, someone who doesn't flinch under pressure, doesn't seek approval, and doesn't fall for emotional traps, it unsettles them. They assume she must be calculating, ruthless, or even dangerous, when in reality, she's just immune to their usual tricks. That's the Sigma female's power. She doesn't manipulate, and she doesn't allow herself to be manipulated. She exists entirely on her own terms. And in a world where so many people are easily swayed, that makes her an outlier. If there's one thing society has always feared, it's a woman who can't be controlled. Number 10. They master the art of emotional concealment. Emotions are one of the most powerful forms of currency in human interaction. Most people wear their feelings on their sleeves: joy, anger, insecurity, fear, giving others a clear roadmap on how to approach or manipulate them. But Sigma females don't give away that kind of power. They conceal their emotions with precision, not because they don't feel, but because they refuse to be predictable. This isn't repression, it's strategy. They understand that emotions, when displayed too openly, can be used against them. So they don't react in the way people expect. When insulted, they don't flinch. When challenged, they don't rush to defend themselves. When something goes wrong, they don't panic. This throws people off balance. They can't read her, they can't gauge her next move. And worst of all, they can't tell whether she's affected at all. That's where the paranoia starts. People assume that if she isn't visibly upset, she must be plotting something. If she isn't reacting to pressure, she must have an ulterior motive. If she doesn't show vulnerability, she must be heartless. They don't consider the possibility that she simply refuses to give the world access to her inner state. Instead, they project their own fears onto her, mistaking quiet strength for something sinister. The truth is, Sigma females don't suppress their emotions, they just don't put them on public display. They process them privately with logic and discipline. If they're hurt, they don't lash out, they analyze. If they're betrayed, they don't beg for explanations, they cut ties and move on. This ability to control what others see makes them nearly impossible to manipulate, which only fuels the perception that they're dangerous. And maybe in a way they are, but not in the way people think. Their power doesn't come from deception or malice. It comes from the fact that while everyone else is ruled by their emotions, a Sigma female rules hers. Number 11. They treat rules as mere suggestions. Sigma females don't break rules just to be difficult. They break them because they see through them. While most people blindly follow traditions, social norms, and even certain laws out of habit or fear of judgment, Sigma females question everything. To them, many of these so-called rules aren't based on logic, fairness, or necessity. They exist purely to enforce control, maintain outdated power structures, or keep people in line. And if a rule doesn't serve a real purpose, they ignore it. This is what makes them seem rebellious, even dangerous in rigid environments. They don't submit to authority figures just because they're told to. They don't follow workplace hierarchies if they see incompetence at the top. They don't abide by social expectations that require them to shrink themselves or play a role they never agreed to. While others obey out of fear, obligation, or the need to fit in, Sigma females make their own choices, and they don't ask for permission. That kind of noncompliance makes people nervous. Society expects rules to be followed without question, and when someone openly disregards them without guilt, it disrupts the illusion of order. It makes others wonder, if she can live outside the rules and still succeed, what does that say about the rest of us? Instead of seeing her as a free thinker, they brand her as reckless, defiant, or even villainous. But here's the truth. Sigma females aren't reckless. They understand consequences. They just refuse to live their lives based on fear. They play by their own code, one that values personal integrity over blind obedience. And while that might make them outsiders, it also makes them unstoppable. Because in a world where most people are afraid to step out of line, The ones who do are the ones who change everything. Sigma females aren't villains, but they're often treated like they are because society fears what it doesn't understand. They don't conform, they don't explain, and they don't play by the unspoken rules that govern most people's lives. They are immune to manipulation, indifferent to validation, and masters of their own emotions, which makes them unpredictable in a world that thrives on control. People mistake their independence for arrogance, their silence for plotting, and their emotional discipline for coldness. But in reality, Sigma females aren't trying to be mysterious or intimidating. They simply live on their own terms, unapologetically, fearlessly, and without the need for approval. And that, more than anything, is what makes them so powerful. Because at the end of the day, villains aren't just those who do harm. Sometimes they're just the ones who refuse to be controlled. And in a world that expects women to be agreeable, emotional, and easily influenced, a Sigma female will always be seen as a threat. Not because she is dangerous, but because she is untouchable. If this breakdown of the Sigma female mindset shook your perspective, then you're exactly the kind of person who belongs here. We dive deep into the psychology, power, and untold truths that most people overlook. So, don't just watch, be part of the conversation. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an insight that could change how you see the world. If this video resonated with you, like it to show your support and drop a comment below. Let's hear your thoughts. Do Sigma females get misunderstood? Or do they truly hold an edge over the rest? And if you know someone who needs to see this, whether they love or fear the Sigma mindset, share this video with them. Because knowledge is power, and those who see beyond the surface are the ones who shape the game. Stay true to yourself, because the world needs more people who aren't afraid to stand out. Take care, and see you in our next video. God bless.